Good afternoon, everybody. I'm back. With me is Vadim Lavrusik, who some of you might know was previously Mashable's community manager and now works at Facebook. Is that a good move?
Awkward.
Yeah. Start off nice and awkward.
Yeah, no, I like what you were gonna say. Yeah. No, yeah, I think it was. I miss you guys though.
Yeah, we miss you.
Guys, yeah.
We miss you. We're doing pretty well though.
It sounds like it. I'm reading about you in the Times, so that's got to be a good thing.
So at Facebook, you're journalist program manager. What exactly is that, and what's kind of Facebook looking to do in the world of journalism?
It's a really good question. It seems like it's changed a lot in the last 6 months, and we tend to be a very project-oriented and sort of get-it-done kind of company. So it really depends on what sort of priorities are at hand. Basically, I'm in charge of building out the journalist program, and that means building out resources for journalists, working with journalists on media partnerships. I work with our platform team quite a bit, so when journalists want to use our technology for storytelling, I usually work with them on those sorts of things. And then really the last couple months, I've been working very closely with the Subscribe team because a lot of journalists are using that product, and we sort of envision that this would be a product that'd be used pretty heavily by journalists, and so I've been working with the Subscribe team quite a bit for the last couple months.
Right. So Subscribe, though, is a big change in thinking a little bit of Facebook. I mean, it used to be about friendships and relationships, and now Subscribe takes more of kind of the follow model. How do you kind of envision journalists using it? And, I mean, do you see kind of an issue there with people that have been using Facebook for kind of personal use for the last 5 or 6 years, now using it, kind of making the move over and letting anyone subscribe to their feed?
I want to show an example of this because I have this in our slides, and we're going to click around on this. We don't have to go in order. But yeah, I think subscribe we were really, really intentional with the verb. We wanted it to be very specific for content, right? You don't like the person, you're not necessarily following the person, you're subscribing for their content. And so we want it to be a very strong connotation with content, and it's just a very intuitive verb, I think. And so we realized that a lot of people wanted to use their profiles to communicate in a more professional way. And so Subscribe really enables you to do that. If you want to post something to your friends, then only your friends see that when you change your privacy settings on that specific post. If you want to post something to your subscribers, you post it to public. And so it's kind of interesting because there was a moment where you could, or a period in time where you could post things to public, but people weren't really able to keep up with those posts and get them in their newsfeed in an easy way. And so we wanted to introduce something to surface that.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, going back to the newsfeed, actually, there's been some changes there as well recently. You kind of have the top stories thing now at the top. You have the real-time feed going on the side. What does kind of this mean for the world of media? We've certainly noticed some things on our end as a publisher in terms of seeing where our stories appear, but I'm kind of curious running the platform.
Yeah, Pete was just telling me you guys have been getting more traffic, which is good to hear. I think one of the big things, so before when you would come to the newsfeed, you would see top stories, and then you could click to see the most recent stories. And so there was emphasis on sort of things that are popular or things that might be the most appealing to you, and then you would click on most recent, which was chronological but still filtered, so still filtered for quality. And we wanted to surface things that are more timely in an easier way, and to sort of combine these two things into one stream. So when you come to Facebook and you haven't, last time you checked it was last night or something, you would see the top stories that you missed, the stories that you might be the most interested in. After that, when you come back, you're going to see most recent stories. And the ticker was really meant to address sort of the problem of being able to see things completely in real time without a filter. So the ticker is completely unfiltered. You see all the activity from your friends and pages that you're connected to. And so I think this is actually a great thing for media companies because it puts a lot more emphasis and surfaces breaking news content. So there's now 2 opportunities to see that in the newsfeed. You could see it as it loads as a recent story or in the ticker. And like this NPR story, for example, when I took the screenshot, it was posted about 8 minutes ago, and it already has 138 likes because people were able to engage with it right within the ticker.
Right. But so recent stories and the ticker on the right side, it's kind of obvious how those work. Top stories, those kind of would seem to me to be the most valuable real estate on the page. Take me kind of behind the algorithm. What's determining what ends up there?
What's the secret sauce? Yeah. That's like asking like Coke, what's your recipe? It relies on a bunch of different things. It's pretty smart actually, but it's somewhat based on popularity. It's also based on the actions that you've taken. So if you're known for constantly liking my stuff, you might be more likely to see my content, for example. And you probably see my content all the time in your newsfeed. I'm just kidding. But so it's a combination of those things. It's also, you know, what the people in your social graph. So if a lot of your friends have engaged with a piece of content, you're going to be more likely to see it. So there's a bunch of different sort of weights within the algorithm.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to subscribe for a minute, I'm seeing, you know, some journalists that have tens of thousands of subscribers already, others that aren't seeing that kind of growth. What's driving growth for certain people versus others? And what are some strategies for journalists to build a subscriber base on Facebook? I mean, it seems like there's a bit of a land grab going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people really benefit from being early adopters. So Ann Curry was on it very early. She got a ton of subscribers because there weren't a ton of people to subscribe to at the time. And so you kind of do benefit from being an early adopter, but there's a lot of really easy best practices that you can do to optimize your profile. So one of the things I always tell people is include your professional and work context within your profile, because I don't know if we actually have a screenshot. I don't think we have a screenshot of it, but you guys have probably noticed this is when you're on the homepage, you'll get recommendations of people to subscribe to, and that's basically based on who your friends are subscribing to. So if 4 of your friends have subscribed to Adam Ostro, you'd be more likely to see him in that. And that unit shows the person's name, and if they have their work title in there, it will show that. And we saw far higher click-through rates on people subscribing to someone when they had their work info included there, because that's really important context. And so that would be my best advice, is make sure that people know who you are, and also make sure that if you're going to open up yourself to subscribers, check your privacy settings, because not only do you maybe have your profile completely locked down so that people can't find you in Facebook search, so you want potential subscribers to be able to find you, but also use that view as feature to see what the public can see, so that you don't have any issues of that. You can always change the settings of specific content retroactively,
right?
And that was really useful for me to do.
Right. Well, that takes me to the other one of many big features at Facebook, but I think one a lot of people are thinking about right now, which is timelines. First off, I mean, when is it going to roll out to everybody?
When it's ready. I mean, the big thing is it's just not quite like there are things that need to get finished before it rolls out, and we don't want to roll something out that's not ready, that people are having bug issues with. So we want it to be as smooth. It's a very big transition. Mm-hmm. So we want it to be as smooth as possible for people. And I honestly, if I knew, I would tell you, but it's gotten pushed back because it's just not ready yet. But I think that it'll be really interesting for journalists not only to showcase content, but I'm excited about it for archiving purposes almost, right? Like when you as a journalist, you maybe shared something 2 months ago and you want to reference it in a post you're writing. Well, it's a lot easier than having to sit there and click see more. You can easily navigate your own content, and that's one of the things I'm really excited about. The other piece is actually using someone's timeline. If you're covering a source, for example, being able to learn historical context about them for a story that you're working on. So I think that there's a lot of interesting implications for media.
Mm-hmm. It does bring me back, though, to my question about journalists that have maybe used Facebook in a personal context mm-hmm. for 4, 5, 6 years, now changing over to subscribe, and then having that timeline opened up. Mm-hmm. What's kind of being done in terms of privacy? I mean, if you were using Facebook strictly for personal reasons for 6 years, then all of a sudden it's this huge distribution platform for news. How do you make that transition?
Yeah, and it's always, I think it's always an adjustment for people. I think some people are more comfortable with it because there are a lot of, especially journalists, they've already been doing that. The thing that they've been doing, and this is part of the thinking behind why Subscribe was introduced, is a lot of journalists, and I did this when I was a journalist, is you would just accept people as friends, like people that you're not actually friends with, but might be your sources. And you always kind of felt uncomfortable doing that because, this is your source and I'm not friends with this person, but I don't want to be rude. And so a lot of people were using it in a professional way. You especially see this from TV personalities. They would reach the 5,000 friend limit and then they'd create a fan page and tell people to like their page. And so this makes it easier to have one place and one destination. I think it solves a lot of people's problems and frustrations.
So should a journalist that has a fan page switch to this, or what's kind of the thinking there?
So we will have a public tool that enables people to do this. If people want to migrate their fans over to a profile with Subscribe, it would basically migrate the people that have liked their page to be the subscribers of their profile. The tool will not support content, so it won't migrate the content over, and so that's that might be a big turnoff and trade-off for some people. But it's not, pages aren't going away. Some people are still going to be more comfortable with using pages, and you have to think about the things that pages have that profiles don't, and the things that profiles have that pages don't, right? So pages have insights. We are thinking about an insights product for Subscribe. Pages, you're able to have custom tabs, which are really useful, and a lot of journalists and media organizations use those custom tabs for live streaming and all sorts of different custom applications. And then the other really big piece is having multiple admins. If I want you and 4 other people in here to administer a page, I can easily add you and you can all sort of manage the page. You can't do that with profiles. And so I think profiles with Subscribe are going to be the most useful for journalists that are posting authentically themselves. I was just talking to Pete backstage about this, but I think if you want to see a journalist using Subscribe effectively, I think he's actually one of those. He's the founder of Mashable, but he does a really good job of being engaging and showing his voice, showing his personality, and he's the one that's posting. If it's someone that has someone managing a page or their brand on their behalf, pages are still going to be more useful.
Mm-hmm. Now, something else you guys have done kind of quietly with all these changes is you've made it so I think you can type, a maximum of 5,000 characters or words?
Yeah, 5,000 characters. Where is that? So this is what 5,000 characters looks like. That's a very big status update.
Well, it used to be 140 characters, so why the...
Oh, no, that's Twitter. Yeah. It was 420 characters. And so before, when you would pass the 420 characters, it actually prompted you to turn it into a note. And a lot of people were basically starting to use notes for blogging purposes. They were using it from their page or from their profile. They were sort of wanting to do longer form content, and people wanted to do it in an easier way. And so that was one of the reasons why we increased it to 5,000 characters, because it's not going to show you it in full like this. You wouldn't see it in the newsfeed like this. That'd be a terrible user experience. But it'll show you, I think, like the first 4 or 5 lines, and then you can click to see more. But it's really for people that maybe you just don't want to have that rich formatting or richer formatting with notes and want to type out something longer. And if you think about the way blogging started out, it was really, really informal, right? People wouldn't include that much formatting in blogs, and so now you're starting to see people sort of use sites like Facebook for their blogging platform.
Well, do you see Facebook kind of turning into a blog platform? You kind of
I mean,
take some of that business away
I've definitely seen a lot of experiments with it. I think a lot of people still want, they like the different controls of blogs and the richer formatting. Notes, it's hard to add links to notes unless you know HTML. So I think it's not there. I think for more of like the personal blogs, for people that just... like my wife has a blog and she writes sort of about her latest adventures in Manhattan, and people love it. And so I think for people like that, I could see it sort of becoming more of a destination rather than, managing a separate blog.
Mm-hmm. Are there plans to add more features there? Or?
It's definitely something we've thought about. I think that, Notes really started out as a Notes product. People sharing notes for class and those sorts of things. And we didn't anticipate people using it, for blogging essentially. And so we tend to, whenever we start people whenever we start to see people using a product in a certain way, we try to make it easier for them. So I wouldn't count it out, but there are no plans at the moment.
Okay. I know you have a couple cool examples of how journalists are using Facebook. We're kind of running a little bit low on time, so I was hoping we could get to those quickly.
Yeah, sure.
So the Dateline one I think is interesting, where you had someone on there kind of live with the show. I thought was an interesting experience.
So I love this example because I was watching this episode, and that's how I caught this example. But they were doing a follow-up on David Goldman, who, I don't know if you remember, he was in a custody battle with his son who was in Brazil. And so they were doing a big follow-up story on him. And I was watching the show, and they had this teaser on the show saying, do you have questions for David Goldman? Go to our Facebook page, and he'll respond to you. And I said, no way. There's no way they have David Goldman, like the source, the primary source of the story on their Facebook page. And sure enough, you went to this post, and he was actually responding to viewers within the comments threads. And I thought that was just a really interesting example of sort of driving the conversation around a specific story on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And now Facebook as a news gathering platform is another thing that I think you're trying to push a little bit in your role. Mm-hmm. Certainly search ties into that a bit. I mean, certainly like Twitter search has been lauded for its news value. But I'm curious kind of what Facebook's doing there to serve as a tool for journalists.
It's funny, I was actually had lunch with one of our search product managers today. And I think, so for journalists specifically, I think that so when you start typing in search, it gives you a bunch of suggestions, right? And a lot of people just click on one of the suggestions because they find what they're looking for. But then if you click on see more results, you come to this page, which gives you a bunch of different filtering options. And I always point this out to journalists, the posts by everyone, which are basically public posts. So during breaking news situations, this is, I think, a great tool. I had a reporter tell me the other day that they used this during the great earthquake of Washington, D.C., which we'll remember for centuries. But he actually used this to search public updates on Facebook, and he found some sources of people posting photos of damage that they sustained. I don't even know there were people that had damage, but I think it's a great tool to be able to find people that are having it. Because I think Facebook, if you think about what sorts of things people post on Facebook, it's very close and personal to them, or that's the way a lot of people. And so with something that's very close to someone like that, my apartment sustained damage, they're probably going to take a photo and share it with their friends on Facebook. And so he was able to find those people and interview them for an article he's working on.
Got it. Now, as far as Facebook's open graph goes, tons of media companies have implemented, whether it's kind of widgets or use the API. I know on Mashable you can log in with your Facebook account to share articles and leave comments. What's kind of the status there? What's new? What's working for publishers? I think you have some stats as well in terms of engagement.
Yeah, I think that this has been an interesting example. I remember working on probably what was the first Facebook news application about 4 years ago, before anyone was even talking about this, and seeing really good results even back then from people. But it's basically these applications are built on the same technology that Farmville is built on, and a lot of these gaming platforms that have had great success on Facebook. And so they're really thinking about it, like the Washington Post, the Guardian, Wall Street Journal. They're thinking about it as almost like your mobile application, right? You're not just using it to point people back to your site. You're able to consume the content in that environment. And so with Canvas applications, they have a lot more control of the way that they present content on Facebook, but they can also monetize it. The Wall Street Journal application launched with a sponsorship, so you can put ads in there, which is great. And so they're treating them almost as like mobile applications that users can add and go back to. And the other great thing about them is really you get a lot more distribution, right? Because if you read something in the Wall Street Journal application and you've opted into this, it's going to get shared back to your friends in the ticker that you read this article. So, and then the other piece is really Timeline. Once Timeline launches, these applications, when you add them, when you opt into them, they have this aggregate box on your timeline. So it shows it, for Spotify, for example, it shows you the top song that you've listened to in the last month and then your most recent activity, and same thing with the news applications.
Right. But going back to the news applications, why would we want our content there instead of on Mashable.com and having people share the Mashable articles and link through? Mashable is obviously where we have all this advertising around our content and make, our business model lives on.
You could do the same thing
there.
on the application, right? You could put advertising on there and monetize that audience. I think that the way that they're thinking about it is they're going to be able to get a lot more users if they put it in the application context, just because you have a lot more advantage and flexibility of sharing within that context. And so, again, it's like I go back to the mobile application concept, right? You don't just put links on your mobile Mashable iPhone app site, right? You have advertising on there, so you monetize it, and people are able to consume the whole article. They're not just clicking to go to Mashable.com. They're actually reading the content there. And so, it's not we're platform agnostic. Yahoo News, for example, uses the same technology and integrate it on their own site. So you can opt into this application, and then it shows you content that your friends have read, and has that option where you can easily share back with your friends. So it doesn't have to be on Facebook. It can be on your own site too.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I think one last question, then we'll open it up to a couple from the audience. Chris Taylor, one of our editors, recently said that Facebook is too damn complicated. With all these new features you guys are adding, choosing between pages and profiles and subscribe, what's kind of your answer to that? You did go through a lot of effort to describe how some of these things work. Mm. For the everyday user, is Facebook becoming too complicated, and what are you doing to address that, if so?
Well, the thing that you have to think about is how users use Facebook, right? They're not using, your average user isn't going to use all these features. And we see this a lot with our different user bases, right? Some people in certain demographics use chat a lot. Like young people, they use chat a ton. And then you see other people, like older demographics, that you look at profiles and newsfeed a lot. And so I think that's actually one of our advantages, is that you can do a lot of different things on Facebook, but you don't have to do everything on Facebook. And so I think it becomes complicated when you're thinking about it that way, but it actually gives you a lot of advantages because you have the flexibility to do a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm. Audience questions? Anybody?
Yes, I have a question about the news apps on Facebook. You mentioned the Wall Street Journal has one, and I think the Washington Post has one.
The Guardian, yeah.
The Guardian, they have ads, and it was a good question asked about, and I publish a niche publication, and I've thought about doing something like that, but the same question presented itself to me. My business model is I sell advertising against my content that's on my site, and if I'm in the Facebook environment, how am I going to monetize putting the content in the Facebook environment? But I heard you say that
you can put ads in it.
You can put ads on that,
on
and
site,
the publisher keeps all the revenue from that? Is there any revenue split with Facebook?
You control everything within the Canvas application environment. It's exactly how companies like Zynga have become billion-dollar companies, right? You control what's within that environment. And so that's actually one of the other big advantages is, with the Washington Post application, they have users opting in, and so they get interesting information about interest from those users, and they're able to present content in an interesting way as well. I think both the Washington Post and the Guardian are now over 1 million monthly active users, and that's within the first month.
So can any news publication develop an app with Facebook, or is there
anybody could have done this even a year ago.
Yeah. Let's get the next question over there.
2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah.
Hi, Vadim. Steve Rebell from Edelman.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So question. So now I'm going to turn this the other way because I'm on the PR side.
Okay.
All right.
I'll do what I can.
Well, that's why we do what we do. So great that you guys are moving into heavy to be a more robust platform for news. So if we're I work with major brands and major corporations, how would you advise them to engage journalists or not on Facebook? Would you, for example, are people setting up press rooms? Mm-hmm. Are journalists looking for source material, and are they looking for sources to cultivate sources on Facebook? Because I see a lot of it happening on Twitter, cultivating those relationships, and I'm curious how how you would, given what you're seeing with the journalists, putting a be a armchair PR person for a second, what you would do.
Yeah, I think it sort of depends on the journalist, right? If what I would do is I would look to see how is this journalist using Facebook? If they have subscribe enabled, chances are they probably already are getting story tips and pitches and those sorts of things. When I look at my inbox on Facebook, I have all sorts of professional, messages like that. It's not just messages from my friends. So yeah, I think it's definitely, the journalists, there are a lot of journalists that use Facebook in both a personal and professional way, and they, especially when they're opening themselves up to an audience by enabling subscribe, I think that they'll have that expectation that they're going to get story tips and pitches.
Let's go to the last question over here.
Earlier you mentioned about the news feed and how the algorithm takes into account your friends and where you click around and stuff like that. Now with the addition of putting news stories into Facebook, do you see that in the future there could possibly be that algorithm putting that into the news stories? So I'm only getting news stories from these publishers that relate to my interests where I click and read.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
So say, for example, you have the Washington Post up here, and say I only read the text section of the Washington Post, and you see that because of my Facebook activity and where I click out to and the most links I click. When these get pushed into my news feed, do you think I won't see stories about politics or world news and I'll have a higher chance of getting a technology article?
That's interesting. I mean, right now, a lot of it is based around the social context, right? So it's more about what your friends are engaging in. But with the apps stories, it'll actually show you, it kind of does the same thing where it'll show you stories higher from an application if a lot of your friends have read it. And we think that social is a very good filter for quality, right? So if a bunch of your friends, the people that you trust, are sharing this or have read this, then it'll probably be interesting to you. But again, that depends on your friends, right?
Let's go to the last question quickly.
Thanks. My name is Nelson Clyde. I'm the publisher of the Tyler Morning Telegraph in Tyler, Texas. We're a daily newspaper. We're 101 years old, and we just launched comments on Facebook on our news site. It increased our traffic a little more than triple.
Nice.
Yeah, we're really pleased about that. Now, the problem I've got is...
I'm happy to hear that.
Couple of key questions I have for you. One is if there's 800 million people on Facebook, have we moved away from libel law that involves public figures? Is everybody a public figure now? Is everybody libel proof in today's world since they're putting their profiles out? Part A. And then the other thing I'm curious about is that the thing that I have to worry about every day is what my journalists are going to do that could get me sued and that I've got to protect against. Now, when something goes up on Facebook they've written, you own the content.
No, we don't.
Are you on the hook for that, or am I?
We don't own the content. You own the copyright of the content you post on Facebook. That's a very, very huge misconception.
Okay.
And I always want to call people out on that because it's one of the first things in the terms of use. It says the content you post, you own the copyright to. It's very, very clear. And I don't know how that all started.
It's a big misconception in our industry.
Yeah.
Without question.
Absolutely. But yeah, you own the content. The first question, I'm not a media lawyer, so I probably couldn't answer it. But I know some media lawyers who probably could.
Awesome.
I almost went into media law, and I could probably try to guess, but I don't want to give people false information.
I think you're going to make a better living at what you're doing.
That's actually why I didn't go into it.
Great. We'll have to leave it there, Vadim. Great to see you.
Thank you.